Okay. Um, Let me discuss with some example. Do you have any confusion or doubt in uh, method overloading or method overriding? Do you have any such doubt?
Sir, can you explain a little bit about sir method overloading versus method overriding?
Okay. Okay. So let me discuss with one example. So I think you have clear concept about class and object. What is class and
Yes.
what is okay. So let me discuss with one example that what is method overloading and what is method overriding. So basically, if we have a class like class A, it's not working. So if we say I have a class A, in this class I have some instance variables. Just for dummy instance variables, say the instance variable is X, another instance variable is there, so it's Y, like this. Now a class is basically a definition of a type. Like if we say what is class, so class is basically used to distinguish one type of things with other type of things. So the properties are being encapsulated within a class. So if we say class A, then these instance variables like X and Y, these are the properties of the class. So if we say student, then in student class, student's name, roll number, address, department, these things are the properties. So which are being declared as instance variables. Now, in C programming language, we know that there is no such concept of class, but in C programming language, we have a similar type of concept, which is known as structure. And we have a different concept, but it looks alike. It's a union. Now, if we say that, but the major difference with class and structure is in structure, we don't have access specifiers. We don't have the access control, and a structure cannot contain any method or any function definition. So if you want to work on this data, then you have to use this structure variable within your functions. But in object-oriented programming language, we have the concept of class. Now, a class is based. Hello. We have the concept of class. Now, in a class, we have some properties. So these properties are being used to distinguish one class with another class. Like the properties of student class and properties of book class will be different. Now, the basic difference, try to understand the difference between a procedural programming language and object-oriented programming language. Here, we have the properties. Now the associated methods are defined within the class, which can work on that data. So if we define a method, the method is being defined within this class. So if I want to define a method here, then what should I do? So here I can define a method like say it's void. So if the method name is add, then we can define this method here. Okay, so if we define it, basically this add method returns, just for dummy example, it will return x plus y. Okay, so if we define a method, then the method is being defined within the class, and in most of the cases the methods are defined in such a way so that this method can operate on that data. It can perform some computation, it can be used for accessing the members. So methods are being defined within the class. But in case of C programming language, we have structure variable. Sorry. And we have the functions which are not within the structure. So the functions and structure definition, they resides independently. Now, if we want to modify a structure, if we want to work on this structure for modification or updation or for any purpose, then the structure variable is being passed to that function. So what is the advantage of this? So if we have this technique of class and object, then we are clubbing the member variables and their access method together within the class. And we can restrict their access by using the access specifiers. So access specifiers means I'm talking about private, protected, default, and public. So these are the access specifiers. Using those access specifiers, we can control the access of the members, but in C programming language, it's not possible. If you can pass a structure to a function, then on any data, it can perform some operation. But if you pass an object to a method in object-oriented programming language, then everything is not accessible from that method. It depends on the access specifier. Now, if we say that we have class definitions like this, so if we have multiple classes like class A, class B, class C, now there is a property. This is a principle of object-oriented programming language. It's known as inheritance. So if we define a class, if we define another class, say the class name is class B. Now this B class can inherit class A. So that means that the properties of class A will be inherited by class B. Now, whether all the properties of class A will be inherited? The answer will be obviously no, because the private members of class A cannot be accessed from class B. Okay, so all the properties of class A cannot be inherited. So if we have any private member in class A, those are not accessible from class B. Now, if I say that whether it's possible that except private member, everything is accessible from class B, protected, default, and public.
Yes,
What you
sir.
have? So except private member, everything is accessible from class B. Anyone will argue with this?
Sir, even protected is possible, sir. How is protected possible?
So protected is possible, public is possible, default.
Yes, sir. Default is also possible.
So is there any difference? So except private member, everything is possible.
Yes, sir.
Anyone who will argue with this?
Sir, it depends upon which package you use.
Yes.
Means,
Yes, you should remember this. If they belongs to the same package, then default, protected, and public members are accessible. Those are being inherited. But if class A and class B belongs to in different package, So if it belongs to different packages, then default members are not accessible, as well as private members are not accessible. But if they belongs to in different package, still protected and public members are accessible. Okay. Now here, so try to remember these things. If you practice with code, then obviously you will not forget. But try to practice it. Okay. Now the question is, if I have this class, so one difference we have understood with the one difference we have understood, that is the difference between object-oriented programming concept and procedural programming concept. Now, in object-oriented programming concept, there is another thing. That is, we can define multiple method having same name. In C programming language, we don't have this provision. We can define a function so that using the same name, you can't define another function. But in Java, we can define two functions having same name. Now, if I define a function, so say I have three instance variables, x, y, and z. So if I call this method, then it will return x, y plus z. Now, if I define another method by the same name, add, and if I pass a parameter, say it's a, I'm going to define this method here. So just a minute. Okay. So in this method, I will return x plus y plus z plus a. Okay. So if so this is the end of this add method. Let me define another method. Say it's void add, and I'm passing two parameters here, int a and another parameter is b. Okay. So I expect that it will return the value of x plus y plus z plus a plus b. So this is the end of this definition of class A. Okay. Now, if I want to test this program, so from main method, I'm not writing the whole class and main method signature. So I'm just giving you one example that from main method, if I have created an object of A, I have an object, so I have created an object. Now my object reference is A. So if I call A add, what will be the value which will be returned by this A add? So this program will compile successfully. There is no issue because Java supports this concept that you may define multiple methods having same name within a class. Now, if I define multiple methods having the same name, but their signature should be different. So what is signature? For the first method, add, it is not receiving any parameter. Okay. For second add method, it receives only one parameter. For third add method, it receives two parameters. Okay. Now, so if I call just this one, a dot add, then we are not passing any parameter from here. There is no parameter passing. So we are just calling this method without any parameter. So with which signature it will match? So the signature match because the signature is same. Now, if I want to call another method like add, say I'm passing 10, then we are passing only one integer parameter. So if we pass an integer parameter, then with which signature it will match? It will match with this signature. This method receives one integer parameter. If I pass two parameters like 10, 15, then this method call is basically it will call this method. So this method receives two parameters. So if in a class we have multiple method having same name but with different signature, then this technique is known as method overloading. So it's method overloading. So this is basically this add method is method. This is overloaded method. Okay.
Sir, I have question.
Yeah.
Sir, if I write void add float a, whether the compiler will treat it as the same. I mean, it will recognize that these are both different functions.
Okay. Let me show you. Just
Yes, sir. The signature will be different, right, for float and integer.
hello.
So the signature will be different.
Now, obviously, integer and float, these are two different types of
Two
data.
different data types.
So if data type is different, obviously signature is different. But one thing you should remember that the signature, the overloading is not dependent on return type, but overloading is dependent on parameters. Either number of parameters can be different, or they may have same number of parameters but with different signature. Your section A. Okay. Okay. Sorry.
Yes, sir.
Now, if I say that just a minute here, if I have a function, sorry, method, so it's
Sir, we
print.
cannot see it.
So we are still seeing the presentation.
Yes, sir.
Can you see the screen?
Yes, sir.
I have just opened this Eclipse. It, okay. Okay. I will create a new project for overloading. Now, I'll create a class, say it's a test main. I'm not using any package at this moment. So I'm creating a class test main, and I'm going to define a class as we have discussed here, A. So int x, this is a instance variable or member of this class. I have one member y. Okay. Now I'm going to okay, I will use a different example. Say it's a string. Y is string, or we can represent it as s. So x is integer, s is string. I want to define a method print. So it will print something. So its return type will be void. It will not return anything. Okay. Now, if I want to print this member x, if I call it, for printing the string, I can define print, say this is the method. So it will print the string, nothing else. So I have a simple class having two parameters, x and s, and their data types are different. So we can define multiple methods within a class. There is no issue. This method print and print string, these two methods are different. So if I call print, x will be printed. If I call print string, this s will be printed. Okay. Now, within a class, we may define some method just like integer add. Now, if I have this method, so it will return, say I have two members, int x and integer y. I have two integer members. So if I want to add it, so it will return x plus y. Okay. Now, in Java programming language, and obviously in many other object-oriented programming language, we can define multiple methods having the same name. So now in this example, the method add, both of this method name is add. What is the difference? The difference is in parameters. Okay. So yeah, the difference is in parameters. So if the parameters are different, then this concept is known as method overloading. So here add method is overloaded. Okay, so we have multiple add method, but that signature should be different. Now I'm going to create another add method. I will enlarge the screen. I'm going to create another add method, and so this is float a. Okay, or for simplicity I can just use double a. Okay, now if I want to add the value of a with x and y, then the data type is different, so I have to typecast it. So I will typecast it to double. Sorry, I will typecast it to integer. Okay. Now look at this. In previous case, if I compare these two add methods, the highlighted part, if I compare these two add methods, here number of parameters are different. If I compare these two methods, number of parameters are same, but their data types are different. Okay. Now from this test main, okay, not before going to this test main, let us initialize some value. So if it's 5 and y equals to 7, I'm not assigning any value, just initializing it. Now I'm going to create an instance of this class. So I will create an object, say its object is a1 equals to new a. So after creating this object, now I want to call this method. Okay, so I will call this method and print the value. So I will call a1 dot add method. So if I call it, what will be the output? Let me, okay, so I have this class definition. Now here I'm calling this method. So if I call this method, which method will be called? I have multiple add method in my class, but only that add method will be called for which the signature is same. So when I'm calling this method as highlighted part, so from this method call, actually a corresponding add method will be called from class A, which do not receive any parameter because we are not passing any parameter from here. So if I run this program, the output will be x plus y. You can see this. The output is 12. So 5 plus 7, it's 12. Okay. Now, if I call a method add with parameter, say it's 10.2, so which method will be called? It will call this method, this one. Let me just to check, I will print a method. I will print here, it's add. It's just add method. From here, I will just to understand, I will print add a. Add, if this method is being called, it will print this. Similarly, if I call this method, then it will print add double a. Okay. Now, if I pass 10.2, let me check what happens. So if I pass 10.2, then which method is being called? This one, double a. If I call, okay, instead of 10 plus 2, if I call with this parameter 10, now check it. It will be add int a. So at runtime, based on your input, it will decide that which method is to be called. And which method will be called actually? It will call the method having the same signature. So if I pass a double data type, it will call the method for double data type. If I pass an integer data type, it will call the method having integer parameter. Okay, but you can call the method by its name. So if in a class we have multiple method having same name but with different signature, then this concept is known as method overloading.
Sir, I have a question.
Hmm.
Sir, if one of the add methods is a variable length argument method, then can be overloaded?
We can overload. Whether I have discussed variable length of argument in your class?
Yes,
Yes, in
sir.
the starting classes we have discussed it.
Okay, fine. I will discuss it in the next class again. Okay, what's your next question?
So then in that case, if we have one method as int add int a, and then we have another variable length argument method, again the name is add, and from the main method, if we are passing just one argument of int type, then which one will get called?
Okay, there are some restrictions. There are some restrictions. If we use variable length of argument, then there are some restrictions, but method overloading can be done, but not in every case. Okay, I will discuss it in the next class because we don't have sufficient time today. That's why I will not start variable length of argument at this moment because it will take long time. But I will discuss it in the next class. Any other query? So method overloading, is it clear? I have something more to say here. Is there any query?
No, sir.
Okay. Now let us make this problem little bit tricky. I'm deleting this part. Okay. This is not overloading related, so I'm deleting this. Now here I have two methods. Now I'm going to modify it. So if it's int a float b, or yeah, I'm using the same data type double b. So here I will add b. Okay. I have to typecast it to integer. Now here I'm passing int a, int b. So first parameter is double and second parameter is integer. So here I will add this value of b. Okay. So from this method call, if I pass this, it is not being supported because there is no such method definition. Okay. I'm trying to call a method having two integer parameters, but actually there is no such method definition. So if I convert any one to double, then it will be called. So if I make this second parameter is double, then corresponding to this method will be called. If I make first parameter as double, then this one will be called. Okay. So in this way, method overloading works. Okay. Now, your question was, what is the difference between method overloading and method overriding? Okay. Now, I'm going to discuss overriding here. So is there any doubt in method overloading?
No, sir.
Okay. So I will define another class, say the class name is B. Now, if this class B inherits class A, so method overriding will come to the scenario when you have this inheritance relationship among the classes. Okay. Now in class B, in this class definition, if I define a method like int add double A and double B, and it will return what should it return? It should return A
A plus
plus
B.
B. Okay, as the data type return type is integer, it will be int okay, I'm typecasting it to integer. Now if I say x plus, I'm defining it in the similar way, x plus y plus this. Okay, I will copy this line to understand that this method is being actually called. So add, it's a double A and double B. Okay. Now from this class, if I call this method A1, sorry, now I'm going to define creating a new class. So I have created a class B. So let me create an object of class B. So it's B1 equals to new B. Okay. Now I'm going to call this method. So B1 dot. If I call this method add, having two parameters like 10.2 comma 2.3. Okay, this is the method call. So which method will be called here? B1 dot add 10 plus 2 comma 2.3. So it indicates that the data types are double. So if the data type parameters are double, then in B class we have this method add having two parameters double. So this method will be called. So if I run this program, let us check. This one is being called. So it's again method overloading. There is no such definition in superclass. So if I say that this method add, what's the signature of this method? Double and double, two parameters with double data type. So there is no such definition in superclass. So it's a method overloading. Again, it's a method overloading. So we are adding a new method having the same name but with a different signature. But if I change one of this definition, just instead of deleting it, I will add one more method here. Now, if I'm going to define a method where first parameter is integer and second parameter is double. Okay. Now, if the first parameter is integer and second parameter is double, then in your superclass, a similar definition exists. So if I consider this method definition, in superclass, a similar definition exists. Okay. So if a similar definition exists in superclass, now this technique.
So you can add a statement that shows that in which class it is, in which method it is.
I will add it. I will add it obviously. So if you have same method signature in superclass, then system will be confused that which method is to be executed. Just if I change that in this subclass method, I'm going to add x plus this, and in superclass I have y plus this. Output will be different. So if compiler calls, well, sorry, not compiler, if your runtime environment calls the superclass method, then the output will be different from the method if it is being called from the subclasses. So if so it is dependent. So if it is being dependent, then what kind of property will be supported here? So I'm going to revert it. So I will revert it here. I will again revert this code, and I will add that it's a b colon this. So it's a b class method, and here this method is in class A. Okay. Now let us check. If I call this method, first parameter is integer and second parameter is double, then if I call this method, obviously subclass method will be called. Let us check. It will be a subclass method. So you can see this message p colon add. So the method which is defined in subclass, that method is being called, not the superclass
So if
method.
we call it from the object A1,
If
so
you
if we
call
call
it,
it from the superclass object.
obviously superclass method will be called, because there is no relationship of subclass. If you directly call it from
Okay.
superclass, if you call it by using this superclass reference, sorry, superclass, then it will call, then superclass method will be called. If we consider B class B, class B inherits the property from A. That's why if you work with object B, or here B1, then it is getting some properties from class A, and it has its own properties. So if the scenario is this, then obviously subclass methods will be called. If you have same signature in superclass and subclass, obviously subclass method will be called. But if
So
you,
whenever we implement overwriting, we add a call statement for the superclass method. So what was the syntax for that? I forgot.
which one?
So whenever we implement a overwriting method, we call the superclass method as well when we are calling it from the subclass method. So what was the syntax for that?
If you want to call the superclass method,
Yes, sir. From the subclass method, add int a double p.
can you check it? Can you check this one? You have internet, you have the book.
Yes, sir. I will check it once.
Check this one first. You will understand something which we have not discussed here yet. Okay, I'll come to that scenario later. So now, if we have this signature, this method signature and this method signature, these two things are same, then this is overriding. This technique is overriding. So superclass method is being overridden by subclass method. Okay. If we have superclass method, or we have a subclass method having the same signature, then superclass method will be overridden by subclass method. That's why it's overriding. Okay. Now, here I want to show you one more thing, that if I use reference A2, and I'm going to create the class B. So I'm creating an object of class B, but I'm receiving it by A2. So a reference of class superclass. So if I create a subclass object, but we refer to, if we use a superclass reference, then what will happen? So A2 dot, I will call this method add, and with this signature, which is overridden. So if I call this method, so first parameter is 10 and second parameter is 15.5.
So you should call the subclass method because the object is of subclass method, right?
So be very careful about it. During when we have discussed that if we have a super class, now we don't have time. No? Is it over already? 12:31.
Yes.
Just I will
Just say so.
take only 1 minute. I can't complete it today. So here we know that if we have a object like this, can I call this one 10 dot? So I don't have this signature in superclass. I don't have this signature in superclass, the highlighted one. So there is no such signature in superclass. Now if I want to call it, so A2 dot, say it's 2, it cannot be called. Be very careful about it. If I use a method call using a superclass reference, only those methods can be called which are defined in the superclass or which are inherited by the superclass. As this method double double, so add double double, this method is not defined in superclass. That's why the method cannot be called using superclass reference. Am I clear? But still, if I call this method like this, add integer double, so we have the same method definition in subclass and superclass. In that case, it is not going to call the superclass method. It will call the subclass method. Try to understand. This one is very tricky thing, generally, which is asked during your Grand Viva. If I use superclass reference, only the methods which are defined in superclass or which are inherited by the superclass, those methods can be called. But still, if we have a superclass method which is overridden in subclass, then obviously subclass method will be called, not the superclass method. Okay, so don't think that as we are using a superclass reference, the superclass method will be called. No, it will call the subclass method. Okay. Okay, so I will not continue anymore. You have next class. So fine. So we'll meet in the next class. We'll discuss it. We are a little bit confused about your class routine. It's different in different location. So I will inform you. I will schedule the next class again. Okay, just before leaving, I will take your attendance. So Okay.
Okay.
Hello, Shanendu.
Yes, sir.
I was saying